Hey everyone, it's the Angry Honey Badger, and it's time to take a look at another League Talks episode. If you have a question for a future episode, don't be afraid to ask by sending an email to me at angryhoneybadger@hotmail.com or sending me a private message on YouTube and labeling the subject League Talks. The game in the background is a continuation of the last League Talks game that was playing. I believe I'm playing Nunu support, although I think I get a lot of kills, so that's not very support-like. But go ahead and enjoy that while we go over the first question. This question's from Chad. He asks, I like to play the Twisted Treeline map more than Summoner's Rift, but I found out that it seems a lot of people like to play on Summoner's Rift. Do you like to play on Twisted Treeline, and why do you think so many don't like it? Well, for me, I do like playing on Twisted Treeline occasionally, mostly because it's a different map than Summoner's Rift, and it's just nice to play something different occasionally. I do have a 3v3 ranked team that we do play some games on Twisted Treeline, just because it's a little bit easier to get 3 friends together than 5 friends together that you want to play ranked with. But we don't play too much of that. I think a few reasons why people don't really enjoy Twisted Treeline as much as Summoner's Rift is because you can get away with some really weird team compositions and you can just play some really odd strategies to win. Some stuff that usually wouldn't win on Summoner's Rift. It's just kind of the standard map for playing those styles of tournament played based games and everything like that. I think a lot of people are just really used to that 5v5 setup rather than the 3v3. Twisted Treeline really isn't a unfun map to play. Some people might find it that way. I think it can be fun, and that's why we have a 3v3 team that does play on it. We do a composition of 2 bruisers and a AP caster, because you can get plenty of tanky ability out of your bruisers while your caster can help blow people up, and your bruisers are still putting out plenty of attack damage. So that's kind of the setup that we usually go with. I know a lot of people try to play anything that you can on that map. You really don't need carries on that map because as much as their range is nice, you can get to them pretty quick because there's less people in between you to get to them, and you can blow them up quick because they're pretty squishy. But there's a lot of weird things you can do on that map to play. You can just do a full tank team, and that can work out. It just kind of depends on who you're up against, but you see some really odd combinations in the 3v3 map. I do think that Twisted Treeline, though, is a great place for people to learn on. There's not quite as many hectic, big battles going on. It's a better place, I think, to learn sometimes than Summoner's Rift, but in the end, it seems like most people go to playing just Summoner's Rift because that's just kind of how the game is set up to be played. My next question comes in from Christian. They ask, I'm pretty passive when I'm playing a 1v1 solo top or mid lane. I do not play aggressively because I am always afraid of feeding the other team, and I almost every time lose my lane first. I play aggressively when I am fed, but this is not every time. This can be good for my junglers because it's easy for them to gank. I literally hug my tower in the process, but I become underfarmed and everyone knows that farm wins games, not kills all the time. When I am trying to be aggressive, I almost lose every time. I just can't explain why I am failing when I play aggressively. Could you give me some advice on how to play more balanced and not be so afraid to play more offensively? Well, this is an interesting question. I think it actually does plague a lot of people who kind of transition out of playing AD carries and tankier players, and they start to go with more aggressive bruisers and assassins when they go to mid lane and top lane. I think one of the main things I can say to help with this is try to play a lot of different champions. I know that I become better every time I play a newer champion or get more acquainted with another champion's kit I don't typically play, especially if I'm going into a top or mid lane situation. If I'm going up against someone I know how to play, or at least know how their kit works, I know how to counter it better, and that can make me play aggressively because I can know when to go and attack them based off of what abilities they've just used. Lately, a lot of people have been struggling with Darius because of his kind of unique and a little bit overpowered kit in certain situations. The main thing I've realized lately is every time he misses his Q, if he comes towards you to try to hit you and swipe you, after he misses that, he doesn't really have too much left to do to you besides rake you in and slow you, which isn't a bad thing if you're going to attack him. It gets you closer to him faster. So one thing I look for him when I'm up against him is I just look for him to miss his one ability, and then I know it's on cooldown, and then I can jump him, do a little bit of damage, and get out if I want to poke on him that way. Other ways that you can kind of negate this is you just need to obviously just be more familiar with the kit of the champion you are playing up top and just knowing when you need to farm and when you can poke. I know some people just like to poke a lot and then they miss out on their farm, and then by poking a lot gets them behind, especially if they lose a fight. They go back to buy, they don't have any minion kills, so they don't have any gold, and they fall behind that way. They fall behind in items. It's not necessarily that they're bad, but they'll fall behind in items, and then the other person against them can kind of cash in on that because they have new items, so they're going to be a little bit stronger to fight that person. But I think overall the main thing is you just kind of need to keep just honing your skills with all champions. You just kind of need to pay attention to what all those champions bring to the table and what makes them powerful, and look at the kind of the items maybe that they've bought. when I go up against a solo top champion who I can see has got armor and 5 health pots at level 1, I have to be careful with that. They can literally pop health pots for a few minutes in a row and not lose any life. I don't really want to necessarily jump them constantly to make them lose all their health pots. I want to hope that they fall behind sometimes because they bought all those health pots and they only have 1 item. So there's a lot of really weird tactics you have to pay attention to for some of these things to work out. Another thing some people need to pay attention to is just how some champions work with their passives. I know a lot of people go up top, and if they're up against a Riven, she can be pretty tough occasionally. You just have to see how her passive works and see if maybe she has lots of attack damage. Try to see if you can click on them and up in the left corner, see what their current attack damage is at. If they're running all attack damage runes and they came out to lane with a Doran's Blade, she's going to do tons of damage at level 1 and level 2. You kind of need to give that champion some room to back off and not play aggressive early, so then you can get all of your things up and then be aggressive later. So I think it just kind of comes down to whether or not you can kind of adjust to what they bring to the table as their champion when they come top, and seeing if you can counter what they're trying to do damage-wise to you and how you can counter it. It's a lot of weird things to do, and mostly a lot of this takes tons of time to play. I will say I think it's better to play a little bit passively and lose out on a little bit of farm if you can, and not give them kills. And if you are hugging your tower a little bit and it does give your jungler the opportunity to come gank, remind your jungler that they're pushing and that they can come gank. And if they keep coming through the river to gank and it's warded, tell them to go around the long way. Tell them to go through the enemy jungle up the side and behind them. You can pretty much get a kill every time if they really are pushed. They can't really get away from 2 people like that. So overall, you just kind of have to play the game a little bit more and just kind of familiarize yourself with all the things every champion can do. You'll learn a lot over time by just playing lots of different champions. As I've always said, it is very helpful on a free week. If there's a champion you've never played, at least play them once to understand their kit. Another thing you can do is go watch maybe some build videos that I've played that you've never tried that champion. Maybe you can learn something from those just based off the abilities that I'm using in those builds, just to see, oh, I didn't know that that did that, and that can kind of help you stay away from certain situations that may cause you to fall behind. My next question comes in from Brandon. He asks, what are some tank champions that you would suggest for others to play? Well, some tanks that I would suggest for others to play, I would suggest Singed, Alistar, and Amumu. There are other ones too that are really good that I'm not going to talk about, like Shen's really good if you play him really well, and Leona's really good if you play her really well, but I'm going to concentrate on those 3 I mentioned because I like what they bring to the table when it comes to crowd control and just other damage options. Alistar does decent damage. He does have a little bit of that heal that can help in lane. He does jungle really well, and he can gank fairly well too. He's pretty strong with his ultimate up, and his CC, as I mentioned, is quite nice. So Alistar can be really strong. He does take a little bit of time to get down and to practice. I don't play him too much, but I do enjoy what he brings to the table as a tank character when he's played as a tank and not as much as in support. As for Amumu, Amumu's great in the jungle and can gank well, as some know, but he also is really good in lane, surprisingly, and a lot of people don't see him there, but when he shows up, he can do some really nice things for you in lane. His ultimate is really good, his bandage toss is really good, he does put out plenty of damage too as a tank, so he can actually add some sufficient damage numbers to a fight, and, you know, it just feels rewarding as a tank to get away and do some damage. And then finally, Singed is really fun as a tank. He can go top lane and farm incredibly well and push fairly well. He doesn't really die if he gets a tiny bit ahead or if he just gets good farm. His slow is outrageous. It does tons and tons of CC. You can't seem to get out of it when you do slow someone with it. And his little flip is sometimes a game changer if he can work his way to someone and just flip him back towards your team. So he can separate others from others' teams pretty well too as a tank, and he can take tons of damage. So he's kind of an annoying champ because, once again, when you try to chase him, his poison trail is something you obviously do not want to be chasing into because it does do plenty of damage also. So I think those 3 tanks are probably 3 of my favorite ones that people should play or at least equate themselves with early if they're learning the game. But there's definitely some other ones that are good as well, but I think those 3 bring a lot to the table and can be great tanks for your team. That's pretty much going to round everything out for this episode of League Talks. If you guys have questions for future episodes, like I said, don't be afraid to email them to me at angryhoneybadger@hotmail.com or send me a private message on YouTube and title the subject as League Talks. Other than that, guys, I'll just see all of you in the next video.